Not sure what camera lens to get? Today I'm talking about focal length and how this will affect your images. Hey there and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Chris. I recently quit my corporate job to pursue photography full-time. I'm teaching you photography and how to start a creative business. Today we're discussing focal length and why it's important in your lens choice. The focal length is basically how zoomed in your photo is. Some people also call this the angle of view. The lower your focal length, the less zoomed in you are, and the more of the scene you'll see. The higher your focal length, the more zoomed in you are, and the less of your scene you'll see. The first step in composing your photo is going to be choosing your focal length. This will determine the framing of your scene and everything that's going to be in it. Even if your focal length is set in stone, you can still walk towards your scene or away from your scene to change the framing of it. Zooming with your feet usually works, but we're going to see how different focal lengths will affect the look of your final image. Let's check out these examples. Here we've got a super wide focal length. We can clearly see the entire forest scene, and the person looks tiny in comparison to everything around her. We have a wide angle of view. This was taken in the same area, but now we're using a longer focal length and we can see the details in the leaves. This is an example of a normal angle of view. I mentioned that sometimes your focal length can also affect how your image looks other than the framing. This is a wide angle photo shot at 16mm, and you can see a lot of depth to it and separation from the subject and her surroundings. The bridge seems to stretch on for a while. This depth is due to the focal length that we chose for the scene and the distance from our subject. This photo, on the other hand, was taken with a focal length of 70mm. Here we have some compression going on in the buildings in the back. Notice how they seem to be stacked really close to one another. Again, this is the result of the focal length that we're using and the distance from the subject. Before we go on, we have to talk about crop factor. The focal length is a physical property of every lens. This, together with your sensor size, is going to affect your angle of view. For full frame cameras, your focal length will stay true to what it says on the lens. However, for crop sensor cameras, and most beginner cameras fall into this category, focal length will be multiplied by 1.5. This is due to the sensor being smaller, so it's going to capture a smaller area of the frame. A 50mm lens on a crop sensor camera would actually be the equivalent of a 75mm lens on a full frame camera. This is something to keep in mind when buying lenses for crop sensor cameras because the focal length is going to be 1.5 times bigger than what it actually says on the lens. Now that you know how focal length is going to affect your photos, you can make a more informed purchase when you're buying your first lens. If you like wider photos or cityscape photos, go with a wide angle lens, something between 16 and 24mm. If you're into getting those close-up shots or portraits, get something like a 50mm or 85mm lens. I can't recommend any specific lenses since every camera manufacturer has their own lenses for their different models of cameras. I've linked what I use below. It's a 16 to 35mm for Sony cameras. It's great for those wide angle shots and it's great for videos too. There are a lot more lenses out there than those that I mentioned, but when you're just starting out, just stick to one of those. Once you get a better feel for photography, you can start experimenting with other lenses. There are even some focal lengths that go all the way up to 400mm for those crazy close-up shots. If you watched this far, thank you. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm posting videos 3 times a week, and I'm teaching you photography and creative business. I want to say a special thank you to all my new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.